Hello, AP Psychology students. Today we are tackling the difficult topic of mood disorders, especially major depression, as well as some more milder forms of depression, dysthymic disorder, and seasonal affective disorder. When I was getting ready to teach this course, this particular topic, about 5 years ago, my daughter had just given me a CD by a group called Casting Crowns, and on it had this song called Set Me Free. And I think it does such a fine job of really describing what major depression feels like. In the first lyric, the writer says, "It hasn't always been this way. I remember brighter days before the dark ones came, stole my mind, and wrapped my soul in chains." Depression does feel like a darkness descending upon one's mind and one's soul. And in fact, the person with depression feels trapped by it. They can feel like they can't see a pathway to get out of it at times. He goes on to say, "Now I live among the dead, fighting voices in my head, hoping someone hears me crying in the night and carries me away." The voices that someone with depression are hearing are not voices of like literal voices like someone with other psychological disorders, but they're self-defeating thoughts such as I'm worthless, or I can't do anything right, or I don't see any hope for my future. And another thing that really marks someone with depression is that they feel lonely, even though they are surrounded by people who care about them and who clearly want to help them. They feel incredible loneliness. And then the end of the lyric is, "Set me free of the chains holding me. Is there anybody out there hearing me? Set me free." They want to be free of the feelings that they have. It is not something that anyone enjoys. It's not something that anyone does for attention. It is something that really, truly the person with depression wants to be free of. Mood disorders. For general information, we're going to start with this. There is an excellent video called Depression Out of the Shadows, and you can find it on YouTube. If this is something that's of interest to you, it was a PBS video, and it goes into great detail of looking at the life stories of people with depression and how some of the treatments have effectively worked for them. Although I must warn you that it is difficult to watch, and if it's not something that you feel comfortable watching, or if you struggle with depression yourself, you might not want to watch it. However, if you have a friend who is just struggling with depression, you may want to check it out. I am not going to show the scene from it at this time. Mood disorders are the leading cause of disability worldwide, according to the World Health Organization. This means that 5.8% of men and 9.5% of women each year are losing work time. That's how World Health Organization defines disability, is whether or not someone can perform their duties at work and in life. And so at any given time, we have almost 10% of women who are suffering debilitating effects of depression, and almost 5% of men who are likewise suffering from this. Some people call it the common cold of psychological disorders because of its prevalence, although I would argue that anxiety is coming close. I'd like to describe the symptoms of major depressive disorder. This is the most severe form of depression. And before I start this, I am going to share with permission a story about my son. He was a senior in college, and we knew that he was struggling, but we didn't know how badly. One of his friends found my email at work and emailed me and said, "Your son is really, really struggling. You need to come and get him." Now, I would suggest to you, if you have a roommate in your future who is really struggling with any kind of psychological disorder where it is seriously impairing their ability to function, that you do contact your RA or contact the parents if you know them directly, because they are the ones that need to take care of their child. And what had happened with my son is he had stopped getting out of bed. He had stopped attending classes, and in fact, instead of graduating as he had planned to in May, he ended up taking incompletes in all 4 of his classes and finishing them over the summer, and technically finished his college education in October when he should have been done in May. In the meantime, he went through intensive day treatment, psychotherapy, to help him deal with his major depressive disorder. This would be the first of 2 bouts that he had, and I'm happy to say that as a young adult man in his late 20s now, that he is doing phenomenally well. He has figured out how to work with the way that his body and his mind responds to stressors, so that I really would be surprised if he ends up with major depressive disorder again. So this, first of all, these are the criteria from the DSM-5 that I have described previously. Obviously, this goes without saying. The person is going to have a depressed mood most of the day, every day. But something that you might notice as a friend or family member is when they begin to have little pleasure or interest in almost all activities. My son was very interested in physical activity. He was a rugby player. He did a lot of workouts, and he was losing interest in that. Maybe it's someone who loves to play video games and they don't care anymore, or a musician who doesn't want to play their instrument anymore. This could definitely be a signal that depression is beginning to creep into their life. Also, because of the action of serotonin, we'll see significant changes in weight or appetite. Someone might either eat too much, or they might completely lose their appetite when they are depressed. Sleep, while they may stay in bed much of the time, they may sleep little, have very disturbed sleep, or they maybe just seem to not be able to get out of bed. The level of activity for most people with depression is sharply declined. However, some people have more of an agitated depression where they are kind of tremulous or shaky in their depression. Of course, they have less energy, and the way that I think one might think about this is if you think about living your life in a pool of molasses, how difficult everything is. It's difficult to get out of bed. It's difficult to do the things that you're expected to do, if not impossible. The thinking and concentration of someone with major depressive disorder is basically centered around how worthless they feel. And concentration on things like academic work is so incredibly difficult. My son was studying, getting majors in physics and philosophy at the time of his first bout of major depression, and certainly the level of cognitive engagement that those subjects require was just not something he could accomplish. Feelings of worthlessness or inappropriate guilt are very common. You know, it's interesting because oftentimes the people who suffer from major depressive disorder are actually really quite successful. They have had many things that they have done very, very well, yet they continue to feel worthless in what seems to be an irrational way, as we talked about in the introduction to this unit. It's unjustifiable, just like their inappropriate guilt is unjustifiable. Let's say their parents have gotten divorced. That is not something that they are responsible for, yet they take that guilt upon themselves. Recurrent thoughts of death or suicide. The person doesn't want to die. But they think about death because they think about it as their only way of escape. Now, definitely, if you know someone who speaks about suicide or recurrent thoughts of death, you are going to want to help them to find resources. And if you look on my Moodle page, you will see a number for the National Suicide Hotline. But definitely this is a time to bring someone else into the picture. Again, they don't want to die, but they think about it as their release from pain. Now, I want to tell you right away that there is help for people with mood disorders, and we'll be talking about that in later videos. And there are some really, really excellent treatments, whether they be biomedical treatments or psychotherapies. The next type of mood disorder, and this is most likely what people that you know of who are depressed have, notice that major depressive disorder is only 1 or 2 weeks in duration. This is significant drop in activity and all of the things that we see here. Dysthymic disorder is a more invasive, depressed mood that lasts for 2 years or more. It's not as disabling as major depressive disorder. In fact, the person who goes to school, who completes their activities, but do so just with a sense of lower energy and self-esteem, might in fact be diagnosed with dysthymic disorder. They have, in particular, difficulty concentrating or making decisions and will often defer to their colleagues or their family members to make decisions for them, and disrupted sleepings. These are the three kind of major aspects of dysthymic disorder. People with dysthymic disorder can also greatly benefit from biomedical treatments as well as psychotherapy. And then, of course, the one that we need to be careful for in northern climates, such as Minnesota, Finland, and some of the northern European countries have trouble with this as well, is seasonal affective disorder. This is depression that manifests itself in fall and winter and relieved in the spring, and it is directly related to the amount of light that we receive during our daylight hours. Now, this is something that oftentimes people will notice after a pattern of years of feeling very depressed in the winter. And so, again, really good treatment exists for this. Treatment can involve light therapy. There's actually something called the happy light that can help with this, as well as the use of seasonal antidepressants that would generally begin perhaps in September or October, since they take about 6 weeks to work, and then titrate off beginning in March, for example. So I recommend, and I've known people in my life that do have seasonal affective disorder, and I recommend that if you do find that you or someone that you care about tends to have depression in the winter and the fall, beginning in the fall, that they think about seasonal treatment for depression. Now, one of the things that we use to assess depression is called the Beck Depression Inventory. Many health offices now do depression screenings as a routine course of their physicals, and they might use a shorter version of this scale. But this is considered to be the primary depression inventory. In fact, bringing someone that I care for in for a depression screening, this is exactly the one that they used. It's a 21-question self-report test. It's very easy to score, and you'll see an example of it on the next couple pages. Now, I want to caution you, as I did on our first day of class, that you not screen yourself. This is really only to be used by professionals. But basically what the depression inventory takes a look at is how you feel about the basic criteria that are on the DSM-5 guidelines for depression. So you can see here things like punishment feelings, guilty feelings, self-criticalness, crying, pessimism, sadness, inherent indecisiveness, worthlessness, loss of energy, etc. This screening is scored on a scale, and a less than 15, none to mild depression, which is kind of funny because that would indicate that all of us have some form of depression. And I would suggest that all of us do have days that are sad, and we have periods that are sad. 15 to 30 would be moderate depression, and greater than 30 would be severe depression. And once again, I caution you about using this scale to diagnose yourself with depression. This is something that needs to be done by a healthcare provider. And also, I would suggest that you keep in mind that all of us have times of sadness, and that most of us will get through these times without treatment. However, if someone has severe depression, they do really need to seek treatment and will benefit from it. Now, I have here, leave about 1.5 pages for notes on bipolar and treatment, maybe a couple pages, and these are in the videos to follow this one. Thank you for your attention.